So hey, I know there's been a few big horror releases out in theaters this week, and I do plan on covering them as soon as I can. Seems as soon as I got over I go home for the holidays and some birthday parties, and now I find myself down with the all over again. But fear not, even though I'm not leaving the house, I still want to report on some cool slasher tidbits, particularly Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street, that I recently came across worth screaming about. Let's check them out. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Fan films seem to be where it's at these days, and there are a few of them that sometimes make for better films than the ones released by the big budget studios. While it seems a new Nightmare on Elm Street film is in development limbo at the moment, director Cecil Liard brings back Miko Hughes, who played young Dylan Porter from Wes Craven's A New Nightmare, as well as iconic roles in the original Pet Sematary, and who could forget his role as the tumor finder in Kindergarten Cop, for Dylan's New Nightmare, an Elm Street fan film. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of New Nightmare. I felt the script leaned too much into Craven's resentment towards the franchise, as well as thumbed its nose at that same franchise, acting as if all involved were better than what had come before. Still, I think there are some very effective acting turns from the cast, some self-referentialism that eventually led to what made up the Scream series, and some nightmare imagery that proved to be original and truly scary. The trailer is decent, with Dylan, Miko, speaking to his therapist about recent nightmares he's been having. But what impressed me most about this was how good Freddy looks and how well they captured Robert Englund's face and gestures. Hell, forget about recasting Freddy. Just have Englund voice the role and another actor wear his face in whatever comes next for the series through deepfakes and, of course, prosthetics. Dylan's New Nightmare, an Elm Street fan film, is currently looking for funding on Indiegogo. What they've shown so far looks very cool, and they say the film is going to be released this summer, so be on the lookout for it. I'll post the links for both the trailer and the link to the Indiegogo link down below before the comments. In other news, Friday the 13th fans may be chomping at the bit to see the new TV series, which is currently in development, but have no fear. Some fans share your impatience and made their own films to bide the time. I reviewed Never Hike Alone a while back. I'll link to that down below, and I felt it was a fun homage to the series with some strong kills, nice atmosphere, and some wicked nods to the movies. Another child scarred by a slasher in the past is haunted as an adult in Never Hike Alone 2, which is currently in the works, and the first 5 minutes were recently released online. I love the creative camera work and ominous tone, and it's great seeing Tom Matthews again as an adult Tommy Jarvis. Never Hike Alone 2 is due out Friday, October 13th, 2023. After seeing this dynamic footage, I can't frickin' wait. Finally, another Friday the 13th fan film was released recently. Here Comes the Night Part 3 is the third and most recent fan film from writer-director Tim McCormick and writer Jason Hayes. I reviewed the first one a while back, but had no idea there was a second, much less a third film in this series. Here Comes the Night takes a lot of what is good from the original quartet of films and simply makes it all feel fresh and interesting. The first film moves quickly and managed to make me laugh a few times. It's a basic plot. 3 campers head into Camp Crystal Lake for some fun, drugs, porno magging, and maybe some sexing if they're lucky. They are supposed to be meeting another group, but instead they end up meeting Jason. The film wraps up with a surprise that I didn't see coming. Here Comes the Night uses the Grindhouse effect filter to make everything feel like a rented VHS tape that has been played way too many times. Technically, the film is rock solid, with creative camera angles and staging, a retro soundtrack, and some truly goppy gore. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's able to grasp the heart of what made the original Friday the 13th films so much fun. My favorite part is when one of the campers takes a puff of weed and blows it out of the holes in the hockey mask that he found in the woods. Later, Jason kills the stoner as he takes another puff and smoke comes out of his mouth as his last dying breath. The ending is surprising, though I think a few extra lines of dialogue may have made it all much clearer. As is, I can see some folks asking, what the fuck, after watching. Still, there's a lot to like about this short and sweet homage to our favorite slasher. Here Comes the Night Part 2 continues right where Part 1 leaves off as we find out what's going on with the other half of our group of young campers, while the first half was being slaughtered by Jason in the first installment. The twist at the end of Part 1 begins to make a bit more sense, and while Part 2 seems to drop its more grindhousey look and filters, it adopts some themes from another popular masked killer franchise that actually fits in quite cleverly. Part 2 is bloodier than the first, and while I kind of dug the Carpenter-esque synth score, I missed the more Manfredian score from Part 1. My favorite part of Part 2 is when one of the hockey masked killers is stabbed by Jason, and he spits out a fountain of blood through the holes in his hockey mask, which then showers onto the onlookers. Part 2 again ends in a cliffhanger that made me glad I was able to see Part 2 and Part 3 back to back. We end with Here Comes the Night Part 3, which again picks up immediately after Part 2 ends. The trio of survivors from the last one make their way to a ranger's station in hopes to find someone to help them. What they get is a drunken ranger who just signed his divorce papers, which makes him very little help against Jason, who is hot on the survivors' heels. We finally find out the reasons behind the multiple hockey mask killers, and while I feel the climax lacked some oomph, and the ending deserved some kind of dream sequence, shock scare, the whole thing ended up being an impressive endeavor from all involved. Put all together, all three parts make up a pretty solid feature-length film, and while it does introduce some new and interesting elements, it still delivers on the old stalk and slash formula. Check out the links for all three short films below, and see the Here Comes the Night trilogy yourself. Well, there are a few slasher shorts to help pass the time. I know there are a lot of these out there on YouTube to sort through, and not all of them are very good. But the ones featured here seem to be able to harness what made me love slashers in the first place. And until the powers that be get their heads out of their collective asses, it's awesome that these creative fans have made and shared just how much they love the Freddy and Jason franchises.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside